What is going on, everybody? Welcome back. I know we're a little bit behind to another episode of Haul Across the Country. This time, Houston, we have a problem. So, last time I caught up with you guys, we were in, I believe, Somerset, PA. Had a relatively short day the day prior, after a 28-mile day that led into that. So, I'd covered about 36 miles, 36, 37 miles over 2 days. And then, so that's where we're going to pick things up and kind of get you guys caught up to where we're at today. Um, so, leaving Somerset, we still had a plan that I wanted to go see the Flight 93 memorial, especially with 9/11, coming up. So I made a plan, and we got out that day, and first thing coming in, like right outside the hotel, they had this awesome little flag display on like a large grassy area leading up to it that represents like all the flags that were planted. There was one for everyone that lost their lives on 9/11. And as I was walking up, I saw one that had like fallen out of the ground or just bent over, or maybe they just didn't stick it in to the ground deep enough so that it would stay up. So I made sure I put that flag so it was standing up. Checked with the rest of the flags that were kind of in the vicinity. I didn't want to go walking through the whole display. Everything looked pretty good. Started hitting the road that day. Had a nice little sunrise. Except for my face. I'm sorry, guys. I can only work with what the Lord gave me. Um, a lot of little climbs coming out of town. Nothing like what I had done previous or would encounter in the next few days. Um, Sadly, though, there wasn't a whole lot of places to stop and like get breakfast or lunch or anything like that. So I had gone, I don't know, about 5 or 6 miles, and had come to like a little town called Friedens, Pennsylvania, and there was like a little dip. So like right at the bottom, there was a little bit of shade, uh, right under a tree. So I pulled the chair out. There was a barbecue place there. Unfortunately, they weren't open that day because I love me some barbecue, and so I was just chilling, and I knew I didn't have a super far way to go. I think from there it was like 12 more miles, or no, 6 more miles to get to the memorial. 6 or 7. So like on a good day, like maybe 3 hours of walking. Pretty good temperature, wasn't overly hot, anything like that. But I was sitting down, and an older gentleman comes up to me, and I just say older because if they're older than me, then you're older because you're older than me. Uh, and we got to talking, and like he looked at the cart and asked what I was doing, and we delved into the mission and where I was going and the things like that. And I was Mr. Darcy Taylor, super nice guy, and we got to talking about my route going up towards the memorial, and he was like, "Well, if you want," he's like, "I got a motorcycle trailer that I usually use to take my wife's motorized wheelchair when we go out." He's like, "I could take your cart up to the memorial for you, and that's one less thing you gotta push because you have a climb coming up that's pretty stiff." And I was like, I don't turn down a chance for somebody to take the cart, so I helped him. We loaded it up. He got it all strapped down and everything, and I threw a couple Gatorades into my pack and just took the pack and started kind of hoofing it. A little bit prior to meeting Mr. Taylor, though, and almost forgot about this. I was coming up the road and I ran into this woman, Justine. She kind of flagged me down and was asking. She's like, "Hey, are you okay? Do you need anything?" And I was like, "No." It's like, "Got a gallon of water. I got like 4 or 5 Gatorades." I was like, "We're all good here. I appreciate it." And she kind of came out of the house and was asking what I was doing, and I explained to her the mission and everything, and she kind of started to tear up, and she told me that recently she had lost a very good friend to suicide. So I said, "Well, wait here for a second." And I went back to the cart and I grabbed our book that we use to keep people's names in for those that we've lost to the mental health battle. I was like, "If you want," it's like, "there's no pressure." It's like, "If you'd like to put his name in the book, I keep that book with me. I keep that book safe. That book stays as safe as I do," which really, if you think about this walk so far, that hasn't been that safe. I have been in the hospital more than I should. But she was glad to sign it, and she wished me the best. And then I went on and I met Mr. Taylor, and he had talked to me about this hill that I was going to have to climb. And if I remember right, it was probably like 500 feet of elevation gain and like a mile and a half. I mean, it was, like 45 degrees, fairly good climb. And this would be like a recurring theme over the next few days in Pennsylvania as well. Um, but he's like, well, get to the top, or when you get near the top of the hill or you get close to the memorial, call me and I'll meet you. And I apparently was not moving fast enough because he ended up catching up to me right near the top of the hill. And it was actually a good thing he came out early. He's like, "Hey, do you need anything?" And I was like, "No, I still got a few Gatorades left in here, and I'm almost to the top of this, so it should level out and be fairly easy from here on out." The catch was my GPS had marked a specific route that went like up Skyline Drive to the memorial. What the walking GPS didn't know was that Skyline Road was closed because Mr. Taylor, and he would follow me for like this last few miles leading up to the memorial, like the last, I don't know, 2 to 3 miles. And he went up ahead, and I saw him coming back, and I was kind of like, "What's going on?" And he says, well, I tried to go up. He's like, "The Skyline Drive is like overgrown and the road is closed. Like, you can't go up that way." And I was like I just climbed this giant hill. Um, so we ended up taking a little bit of and I think it added like a half to 6/10 of a mile, and basically going straight out like a cemetery road, and then popping out on US 30, the Lincoln Highway. Um, and he's like, when I see you, he kind of leapfrogged me for a little bit with the cart on the trailer, and he said, when you get to the entrance of the memorial, I'll pull up and pick you up and take you up into the memorial, because it was like a 2.5 to 3 mile road from 30 to get up into the memorial. And since I wasn't using that to advance towards my end goal for the day, like, it didn't violate my no vehicle rule. So, we do that, and I get up there, and he had obviously been there before. He lives in the area, and he was like, you really need to take some time to kind of see everything. So he's like, we kind of talked it out, and he dropped me off there and said he would come back in like 2 hours. I think we set it at like 4:30, like maybe back here at 4:30. And so I took my time. It was a really somber memorial, and the way they have everything set up, like, if you haven't been, man, the nose itches today. If you haven't been to the Flight 93 Memorial, the aesthetically, like the way everything is built and set up is really awe-inspiring. But like, you come out like right when you walk up, you know, you have this view. Now this is the end, like that the ground there. There's a long black path that is the flight path for Flight 93 that day. And you get there, you get to the end of this, and you see this was a quote from an LA, I believe it was an LA firefighter that had come out to help. And it says, "A common field one day and a field of honor forever." And they're way in the background, by those two smaller trees. There's a small rock back there that marks the actual impact point of Flight 93. And I ended up taking that trail down, and there were individual like marble wall panels for every uh, person on that flight, including one woman who had like an unborn child with her. If they were a flight attendant or the pilot, or if they had something else identifiable about them, it's on these marble panels. It's really just it's a lot to take in. It's a lot. It's a very good memorial to heroes of that day. Um, and then I spent a couple of minutes inside, probably about a half hour, 45 minutes inside the memorial. One, kind of cooling off a little bit, but two, like seeing, like walking through that day. I was a freshman in college at Ohio Northern University when 9/11 happened. And they had three separate phone calls where you got to hear, the last phone calls that people made to their relatives that day, to their loved ones. And man, that was like, I've never listened to any of them like in my life before. And like the three that they play, it's just oh God, it kicks you right in the gut. it's a lot. But you know, I got through there and I teared up. Like I had to step back for a second, because these are people. That's the last words they ever spoke to their family. Like that's rough to hear. To live through, uh, you know, to hear that kind of stuff. But I get done. I come back out, and then I get to the top of the trail that led down to the marble walls, and Mr. Taylor was there, and we start driving out the uh, the long like access road or whatnot. And he's like, "Well, what I'm going to do?" He's like, "I'm going to take your cart to the top because you got another climb here, a smaller climb, but." He's like, "I'll take it up to the top where it levels out, and then we'll drop your cart off." So I say absolutely. That works for me. And it was only like, I don't know, like 100, 150 feet over, I don't know, a half mile or so. Like compared to what I had done earlier, it wasn't that bad, but it was getting hot. It was the hottest part of the day. I'm already tired, but we get up there, we unhitch the cart. He's like, "Do you like to eat at Arby's?" And I was like, "Look at me. I don't really say no to much food, period. Uh, but I do like Arby's." So he's like, "Well, here somebody gave me this Arby's gift card." He's like, "I have no idea how much it's for, but it hasn't been used. It's all yours." And we said our goodbyes. And he follows on Facebook now, and he's been offering some pretty good advice as far as the cart and modifying it, making it work a little bit better for us. Um, but as I finished, or as I continued this walk up 30, earlier in the day, I had reached out to a couple of places. Camp Allegheny, which was like a youth camp, a church camp that had plenty of, they had a lot of room. And I sent them a message. I was like, "Hey, do you guys mind if we throw the tent down?" And I had also sent a message to Boyer's Pond Campground. Same thing, just asking if there was somewhere I could throw a tent down. Like, "Hey, this is what I'm doing. Would you guys be able to work with me at all?" Boyer's Pond gets back with me first and says, "Yeah, like absolutely. We've got a spot for you to throw the tent down. You're more than welcome." I was like, "Cool." And then about, I don't know, half hour later, they sent another email and they're like, "Hey, actually, we spoke to the owner. They want to go ahead and give you use of a cabin for the night, like a small, like, 2-bed cabin." And I was like, not going to say no. I'll never say no to sleeping indoors. Even though with the cooler temperatures at night, I definitely don't mind sleeping outdoors. I kind of prefer it. Just I like that fresh air feeling. Um, but as I'm walking up 30 going towards the campground, Boyer's Pond, I came across this truck, and like I saw the name on it, and you look on there, it says the Machine Gun Preacher. And I had vaguely remembered stories about this guy. Gerard Butler played him in a movie. He's essentially like a former biker who now has an orphanage in, I believe, South Sudan, where he rescues kids from all the warlords over there. And he owns the campground that I stayed at, that's also got a church on it. Uh, you'll see right here the Central City Church, home of the Machine Gun Preacher, Sam Childers. Um, and yeah, the owner found out what I was doing. They were like, "No, no, no, let's give him a cabin." Well, in doing so, there, I also got introduced to two really amazing people. Uh, yeah, they were from Berlin, Pennsylvania, which is somewhere that I'd never come close to. And it was Christy Foy and Darren Ronald. And they only found out about me because the owners of the campground knew them and knew what they had been through, and they got a hold of them. They got a hold of me through the Facebook page, and they're just phenomenal people. I mean, everything they've done and want to do to help as we go forward. But they came out, they came into the cabin, and they brought me pizza. Darren brought some Miller Lite. I had a couple of Miller Lights. I don't drink like I did in my 20s, but I did have a couple after this day. Um, and we got to talking, and they both told me, the stories of losing children to suicide, and the impact it's had on them, and how now they are flipping that around. They're flipping that trauma around, and they have formed a survivor group, a support group for survivors of or anybody that's lost somebody to suicide, in Berlin, in the Berlin, PA area. So, um, Definitely give them a look. If you know anyone that's been through that and needs support, they are trying to get everything going and get it off the ground, because that's what we ultimately need is support for each other. We need to help each other through these times. But what I really admire about Christy and Darren is that they have taken their tragedy, and just like Sam Teich in Indiana, um, Dina Smith in Madison, Indiana, um, they're taking the pain, and they're taking the trauma, and they're using it to try to improve things for other people. And I feel like after you've gone through something like that, that's the only route you can go to kind of to keep yourself uh, somewhat intact inside. Um, but yeah, I got to sleep that night eventually. Had a pop-up storm, which I had to run out and like cover the cart up real quick to make sure everything stayed relatively dry. uh, and got ready going to the next day. Next day was I was planning on going about 19 miles to get to Bedford, PA. We had looked at the weather report for the next few days, and there were some pretty strong storms, like 70-80% chance, like every single day. And I'm not opposed to rain. I'm not opposed to walking in the rain. Even like Fred Astaire, I don't mind singing in the rain. But when you push 100 pounds worth of lightning rod, especially up and down these mountainside, hillsides, whatever you want to call them, they're technically mountains, so we're going to call them mountains. Uh, you know, I would rather be safe than sorry. So I get up, and it's relatively flat up at the top. Like after I left the campground, a couple like slow hills, nothing severe. But you get to the top and of this one range, and you kind of dip down into a valley. And I had, I believe it was about 6.5 miles at a 9% grade, which is, I don't know the angles. Like I'm not Department of Transportation, but it felt like it was like probably 35 to 40 degrees. Like it's so bad that they have like multiple stops along the way for semis going along 30 to pull off to like cool their brakes, make sure their brakes aren't overheating and things like that. Um, and I have to hold the cart the whole way down. And a lot of people think like downhill, it's probably not that bad because you're going down. And I'm like, no, it's like downhill is just as bad as uphill, just on a different part of my body. Like uphill, it's my quads, it's my back, it's my core. And running out of breath, trying to keep going and keep going, you build that lactic acid up pretty quick. But like going down, you don't necessarily build that lactic acid up, but like my knees just like got really sore because they hadn't been worked like that. So I dipped down into this little town of Shellsburg, Pennsylvania. There was a little tavern there that had fairly good reviews on Google. And I stopped in. I was like, man, I'm going to get something to eat. I am starving. And I was kind of at that point. I was just worn out. Like that 6.5 mile downhill was rough. It wore me out because normally like 6 miles, like even at my slowest, would take 3 hours, and it probably took 4 or so to get down. Now I did stop and talk with the Bedford newspaper. They came out to meet me on one of the pullouts along the side of the road, do a quick interview. But yeah, it was just rough going downhill. Not a lot of shade. It was fairly warm. I mean, it wasn't like super. It wasn't oppressive. There wasn't a whole lot of humidity, but it was hot. It's still summertime. I was still on blacktop, so that's a lot of heat coming up. But yeah, I got into Shellsburg. Um, I got into it was called the 9 Mile Tavern, and I believe it's because it's 9 miles from Bedford. I'm just guessing there, spitballing. The people were great. The owners were awesome. The food was delicious. I had chicken parm and some like I think it was like fried shrimp or something. I can't completely get away from fried food. Um, but I was sitting there and I was talking to Derek, one of the Morgantown, West Virginia firefighters, who super guy, like still texts me pretty much every day, check how I'm doing. Like he's one of the guys that I like. It's one of those people that I don't forget a lot of the people that I come across, but he's one of those. And I told him and his wife, who made a donation while we were walking. I was like I could see Derek like being one of my like best friends if we were back home. Dude's just phenomenal guy, and we're talking, and I was like, he's like, well, where are you setting up for the night? And he's like, I hope you don't get all this rain that they're getting. I was like, nah, I think we're getting it all starting tomorrow. And he was like, oh, he's like, where you got anywhere to camp? And I was like, well, I reached out to the fire station, haven't heard back. There's a little motel here in town, and he went ahead and called it. It was the Shawnee Motel. It was like a really cool, like vintage, like 1960s motel. Like it was just awesome. Like little like rooms, like hotel rooms, dummy. But like I don't know, like the vibe of it was very like old school. So it was a cool feel. The owner, she was awesome. We almost booked like the whole weekend there just to wait all the storms out and know we had a place. But apparently they had a big festival in town, and they have a lot of people that come through frequently and like to stay at the motel. And she showed me, she went through and looked. She's like, we just don't have any rooms available after tonight. It's like, you got the last room available for tonight. And apparently I think they have a lot of construction workers in the area that stay at that hotel too. um, but no, Derek went out and got, he reserved a room for me, so that was nice, have a place indoors to sleep. um, Doors were a little too narrow to get the cart in, so the cart sat right out front. um, yeah, had a pretty good night. Went to the grocery store there in town too. I got like a cold cut type sub to have a little bit later in the evening. Again, trying to make up calories that I didn't eat the day before, and um, just kind of got going. Took a nap. Well, went to bed. Ate that. Woke up, had some breakfast, um, and I had talked with our board members and our volunteers, and I was like, well, we're gonna have to adjust some things just with all these storms coming through. Especially in the afternoons. Like I don't want to get caught in the middle of nowhere in these storms. I was like, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna stop. We're only gonna do like 8 or 9 miles a day because there were little towns like 8, 9 miles apart. Plus, gotta be honest, I had to be somewhere Saturday to watch Buckeye football. That's my one rule on the wall because I've got to be able to catch all the games. So the next day, we got up and started heading to Bedford, Pennsylvania. And around lunchtime, about 11, I stopped at the Jean Bonnet Tavern. Really like cool place. They had a few goats like in a pen out front, which are awesome because I love animals that aren't reptiles or bugs. But I went into the tavern, and like there are still like the original 1700s building is still there that they've built and maintained this restaurant tavern type building in. Food was very good. Service was good. A few people around me saw, the shirt and everything, were asking some questions. So I'm, more than happy to talk because you spend all the time on the road and it gets a little lonely. But finished I was waiting on the main course. Um, and I got like an alert on my phone, like, hey, moderate rain starting in like 15 minutes. So I ran out, threw the tarp over everything on the cart, came back in, or I grabbed my rain jacket too. So in case it was raining when I left, I didn't have to go dig for it. Um, Went back in, finished the food, got out. It never rained. It just apparently went around us. So I took the tarp off. I didn't like fold it all up. I kept it there just in case, and put my rain jacket on top. Again, if I have to get it, throw it on. It's right there for me. Um, so yeah, I started walking, and I probably hadn't gone. I probably hadn't walked like a half hour, 45 minutes, and you get another notification like moderate rain starting in like 15 minutes. And I was like, okay. So I start looking around, and I was like, it looks like it might rain, you know? So I pulled the tarp over the cart, kept the rain jacket there, and I was just inside of 3 miles to Bedford when literally all hell broke loose weather-wise. I mean, like, it started off as a heavy downpour, um, like no sunlight whatsoever. Like it was just gray, pouring rain everywhere. Like nowhere to duck under either to have shelter. I had the jacket on. Like rain jackets are good in rain. It's not good when you can see Noah and his ark floating by. So like even though I had it on, I am soaked head to toe, just everything. and luckily I had like my wallet and everything under the tarp on the cart, so nothing in it got soaked. Uh, but and the thing is like I didn't even have like a huge percentage of chance of rain at that time of the day. It was all supposed to be later, and Mother Nature was like, I think not. So it got to a point, guys, where and 30 is just at that point is just 2-lane traffic, and there were times where like the cars coming at me could not get over to give me room, and like at first I was miserable. I'm like, oh my god, lightning going on around me, like the rain at times became painful, like might have been a little bit of sleet, might have been a little bit of hail, might have been coming sideways at times, but like at some point you just got to be like, I'm here, I'm in it, let's just embrace the suck. And there was like a school bus coming, and I remember seriously, like I stopped the cart, and I just put my hands out like I was Andy Dufresne in Shawshank Redemption. I was like, just do it, and I just got doused. I mean, it was rough, but I just kept going. I mean, ultimately, what can you do? There's nowhere to like dip in. There weren't like awnings. There weren't a lot of trees. It was just like an hour's worth. And like I said, I was under 3 miles because I remember looking right before all this rain came, and it was like 2.8 miles or so till uh, I got to where I was going to be in Bedford at a Presbyterian church who had offered to help me out for the night. And it was just like I said, that normally would take a little over an hour of walking, so I probably spent 45 to 50 minutes, if not a full hour, just like in torrential rain, downpour, thunderstorm, however you want to call it. And I did manage to capture this that day.
100% wherever I'm at.
So that's what it seemed like. Like anytime there was any type of percentage of chance of rain while I'm out there, it was 100% where I was at. It's just soaked. But I get to the Presbyterian church and I meet the pastor, Jack Miller, and he actually invites me to his home. Uh, they cook dinner, delicious dinner. His family, um, awesome people, and they let me do my laundry, let me get all that caught up. Um, Really good night's sleep. Probably one of the better night's sleep I had. I got like a full 4-hour block, which for me is a good chunk of sleep because it's usually like every 2 hours, like almost like on a schedule. I wake up. I got to at least one like 4-hour block where I slept the whole way through. It was just nice. um, Next day was another short day. Woke up that morning and um, had some breakfast. Uh, Pastor Jack took me into Everett, where I was going to go that day to a breakfast spot um, called the Black Valley Preventer. They're like all farm to table food. Um, like I got for the first time, I had the full English breakfast. And I always wondered like how do baked beans really work on breakfast, but it was great. The only thing I really didn't like a whole lot about it was the sausage. I'm not a big sausage person for any meal, and I guess even for breakfast, it just wasn't for me. Um, Really awesome place though. Other than the sausage, like breakfast was delicious. Uh, so he takes me back to his place. We grab the cart out of the church, grab the tarp, get everything ready, and I start taking off. Um, and got into Everett. It was a pretty low key day. Not a whole lot going on. It was a couple of climbs, but none of them were severe grades. They were more longer, like gradual climbs, so they weren't like overly exhausting. You still stop on them. Very few hills that are a long climb or a steep climb where I'm not going to take a break. Got down into Everett, got to the fire station, went to a little Italian place there in town. Um, had some had like a small pizza and some spaghetti and stuff. Just again, carbs for energy, get me to the next day. Uh, Got back to the firehouse, jumped in the recliner, had the TV going, and just passed out and had a decent night's sleep again. Got up the next morning, went to Sheets, had the at the time the usual Sheets breakfast of a few donuts and some monsters. Got to get that caffeine going. And this day was, I think it was like 8 or 9 miles again to Breezewood, Pennsylvania, which is like essentially like a small town, but it's mostly like a Pennsylvania Turnpike and US 30 interchange area where there's just like a bunch of restaurants, travel plazas, things like that. And there was like a little place called the Budget Motel that I got up to. As I got up to the top of the hill, again, there was one big climb that day to get into Breezewood. And it's kind of funny because like you get up into Breezewood, and then the next day, like in the same day, like it drops right back down, and then you go through like some big climbs that we'll get into in a second. But yeah, I get to the Budget Motel. Luckily, there, because it, everything all food wise was all further down the road. Uh, I was able to get some Pizza Hut on DoorDash, or no, actually, Pizza Hut was just regular. I can't remember. It was one of the two. I got pizza delivered from Pizza Hut. Watched the first game of the season for the Buckeyes. Um, was was a weird watch without being able to text my dad and talk about the games and things like that. Man, I have all these frequent like things that pop up on the walk that make me miss him. But yeah, I mean, it was a good night's sleep. Big storms moved through that day. Again, the door was a little too narrow for the cart to fit through, so I grabbed everything off the top of the tub that I had, brought it in the room, put a tarp over the top of the tub, bungee corded the cart to like a bench that was right outside my room. That way it wouldn't blow anywhere, and just hope for the best. Everything was a-okay. We got going the next day. The next day was going to be from Breezewood to McConnellsburg, Pennsylvania. And there were three big climbs this day. There were three separate 5 to 600 foot climbs that each took place in like a mile and a half or less. And then a couple like 1 and 200 foot climbs in a half mile, like interspersed throughout. So it was a rough day. It was a rough day, but like I went to Sheets. I'm a Sheets guy now. Like I've been in PA for so long, and there's a Sheets literally in every town. They're kind of like Casey's in Illinois, where no matter the size of the town, there seems to be a Sheets there. But I mean, for like gas station food slash fast food, like made to order type stuff, it's really not that bad. I mean, it's not like high. You're not getting like it's still fried food a lot, but it's decent tasting, so I don't mind it. But I'm sitting outside. I'm eating my Sheets breakfast. Actually, this day I believe since I had climbs, like I grabbed like a couple like grilled chicken wraps. Try to get something a little bit healthier than just donuts. I'm not saying I didn't eat a donut, but I made the focus like something a little bit better. And I was outside, and there was a gentleman and his family there, and like he happened to turn his back to me, and I saw his shirt, and I was like, "Hey, man," I was like, "Would you mind if I get a picture of the back of your shirt?" And he's like, "Yeah, absolutely." And I love, love, love the wording on this. Courage is living one more day. And the semicolon is, the it's not the end of a sentence. So it's used by people that have attempted suicide a lot of times to signify that their story's not over. I really like that. It's from the Till Valhalla project, which is a veteran-owned business. So give them a shout out too. That they're not sponsoring me or anything. I just think a lot of their stuff has to do with helping prevent veteran suicide. So we owe those guys. So if you get a chance, check them out. Till Valhalla Project. They got a lot of awesome shirts on their site. I'll probably go purchase a couple of them. But I got after that, it was like it's time to start tackling these mountains, these hills, whatever you want to call them. So first hill, I get up, and it took a while. I mean, it took way longer than I thought it would. Um, then I'm going down, and Christy, who you might remember from a few minutes ago that I met at the campground, who's from Berlin, who was like an hour and a half away, asked if I still needed or wanted someone to transport the cart to McConnellsburg. And I was like, Christy, I was like, you've done so much. I was like, you guys live so far away. Like, I don't want you guys to drive an hour and a half out here just to take my cart. And she's like, look, you're not going to be in an area where we can help you for much longer. So if we can, we want to. And I said, well, if you guys really want to, I'm not going to say no. So I got through the first hill and I got to the bottom and there was a little bit of a pullout area. So I sent her a message. I'm like, hey, I was like, uh, I'm at this pullout. I'm just going to chill out here till you guys get here. So she and her husband got there. We got the cart loaded up and, I grabbed the day pack like I had been doing, put a few Gatorades and some snacks in it, and they took it up the hill. She actually ended up, they stopped at a gas station and grabbed a few more Gatorades for me. When they came back by, they dropped them off with me. But there were still two more like major climbs that day. So, and luckily the shoulders were like fairly wide on, on 30 as you're going through these mountains and stuff. So it does make it a lot safer, with or without the cart. Even if I had the cart, I had plenty of room that it wouldn't have been super sketchy for me. I did see this little mini cairn that was built along the side of the road. I thought that was really cool. Unfortunately, whoever put the last most recent rock on the top made it kind of tough for me to put anything else uh, up there. But you get to the top of some of these hills, and as much as I liked West Virginia, like every time you would crest a big climb there, it just didn't seem like you got a payoff. Like here in Pennsylvania, man, you get to the top of some of these hills, you get really nice like views of the landscape and everything. It's really cool stuff to see. Um, but yeah, we go up, down, left, right. Like I'm trudging at this point. With about 5 miles left, 5 or 6 miles left, there was a called the Tower Ridge Restaurant and Tavern. I stopped in there, had some dinner. A couple people were like, "Hey, man, we passed you coming up the hill, or we passed you earlier on today." I'm like, "Yeah." Told them what I was doing. Again, good food. Like I haven't had a bad dining experience at this point on the walk. But get done eating there. I get a hold of the fire chief in McConnellsburg, let him know where I'm at, and he calls ahead to make sure that there's somebody at the station for me. And you know go back down into a valley, get to the station, meet one of the firefighters slash medics there. He took me to McDonald's later on to grab one more little thing for dinner. There really weren't a lot of options at that point in the day there in McConnellsburg, so calories are calories as far as I'm concerned. um, he also said he was going to take my cart to the top of the next hill, which would be the last like major climb of this portion of the walk, like the last big mountain type climb that I'd have to kind of endure. Which I, in hindsight, wish I had told him to go ahead and take it down to the next town so I didn't have to hold the cart again as I went through the entire downhill adventure again. But yeah, started up the next day, get up the hill slowly but surely, um, get to the cart, a couple nice views, a few guys, like a group of motorcycle riders pulled in. They stopped, there was a viewpoint, but it had some overgrowth and like I'm too short and it was tough to get a really good picture with like the iPhone. Like if I'd had a real camera, I probably could have got a cool view of McConnellsburg down below. And it kind of really puts things into perspective, like of how far things seem as opposed to how far they really are. Because at that point I had only probably walked 3 miles total, and like down to the town might have only been a mile and a half, but it just looked so far away. They're like, man, that's so far. And I'm like, no, that's only like a mile and a half. That's way worse than what you think it is. um but yeah, I get through there. uh, I get through Fort Loudon. I get to St. Thomas, Pennsylvania. Fire department there is waiting for me. The McConnellsburg guy chief reached out to the St. Thomas chief. They were super welcoming. Um, Nothing in the town really was open for food. Luckily, was able to get some DoorDash from Chambersburg up the road. I ended up only being Burger King, but I can't really be picky at that point. Um, but woke up the next morning and headed from St. Thomas to what I thought was going to be Chambersburg. Because my friend Adam had reached out, and we thought Chambersburg was like, yeah, we'll let him crash here. Like it's a 7.5 mile, 7.5 miles from there, and then I was going to do 11 the next day to get to Shippensburg. But I got to the Chambersburg Fire Department, and again, just some rolling hills, nothing egregious. And I'm chilling out there, and the chief comes out, and he kind of clarifies. He's like, no, no, no. He's like, we have a no tent ordinance because of all the homeless and everything. He's like, and we're the busiest department in the city. He's like, we'll have guys tripping all over each other and potentially tripping all over you when we get calls. He's like, we can't really like, we can't accommodate you right now. He's like, but he's like, let me reach out to the guys at Cumberland Valley in Shippensburg. There's the station that's in the middle of the town. They're not super busy. They'll probably be able to work with you. And he comes back out a couple minutes later. He's like, yeah, you're all good. Here's the deputy chief's number and name. And I'm like, cool. And he's like, yeah, you're more than welcome to like hang out here as long as you want. And I'm like, in my head, I'm like, I still got 11 and a half miles to go. So can't hang out for too long. Kind of adjusted my socks, make sure they were uh, adequately protecting against the blisters, and just got back at it. And it was really nice because I hit this stretch of like fairly straight road. It was just like it felt like going through Iowa. I was like, man, we can kind of get moving now. Um, but about I don't know 3 or 4 miles from Shippensburg, I had gotten a message from Jen, a woman who I had met on my first walk across the country. She worked at the Gettysburg KOA campgrounds, and she worked in Chambersburg. And she was like, "Do you need anything?" And I was like, "I'm never saying no to Gatorade and water." I was like, "I'll also never say no to candy." I mean, obviously, look at me. Uh, so, she's like, well, you probably don't want chocolate because it'll melt. Gummies, I'm like, I'll eat anything. Like, and even if the chocolate became gooey, I could just cut open a part of the bag and just squirt it into my mouth like I was a giant hot fudge sundae. And but I'm coming up the road, and I see her I see what turned out to be her like pull off on a road. And because doing this for so long, you kind of start paying attention to cars when they go this way or go that way. Because a lot of times when you see a car pull off and they've seen you, like the chances are they want to stop and talk to you for some reason. So I always keep my eye on them. And I watched her like pull off on the side road and then like pull back out and drive away. And I'm like, oh, maybe that person wasn't waiting for me. And it turned out she just went to a farm up the road, and she pulled in, and we were talking, kind of catching up on the last couple of years. She dropped off a bunch of Gatorade and water and like liquid IV, and like an entire Target bag full of various gummy candies, which I'm still working through, Jen, by the way. That's it's still going to take me a few. Um, but as we're sitting there talking, I see this little dude right here, this little barn cat. And I'm telling you, I was I was so absolutely close to taking that cat with me. Cause like once I gave him a couple of scratches, man, that dude was on me. He was like rubbing on my legs, like, hey, what's up, man? Meow, meow. Like, hey, you want to hang out? I'm like, look, I really do want to hang out with you. I might pick you up and take you with me. Um, at that time, though, Darren, again from much earlier, from uh, Berlin, Pennsylvania, he had seen a post that I had made about us trying to work on fundraising and things like that, and needing some help in that regard. So keep in mind, I'm way further than I was when Christy helped me, and he drives all the way out there to bring me some Gatorade, make a cash donation, and we started talking about some things that he's putting into the works to help us out. I'm like, this is a guy who's starting his own nonprofit to help support people who have lost others to suicide, and he's trying to help me out. Like I don't, again, and it's something that I've continued to try to be comfortable with and try to work through personally. Is like I don't feel like I don't deserve that type of help. The cause all across the country, the nonprofit, yes. Me as a person, I'm okay with it. Um, but as he's getting ready to pull out, the owner pulls in and he like grabs the barn cat and makes sure the cat doesn't go into the road. And then I got sad because, if I had just grabbed him a few minutes earlier, I'd have had a buddy with me. Um, but finished up the rest of the walk, fairly uneventful. Got into Shippensburg and got to the Cumberland Valley Hose Company. They grabbed a picture of me on the way out the following morning. Their deputy chief, Fogelsanger, took me to breakfast that morning. This was a day that would really kind of be an omen for things to come, and not a good one. You don't really say omens when they're good things. Have you ever noticed that? Omens always seem to be bad. It's like, ooh, it was a sign if it was good. It's an omen if it was bad. Definitely an omen. But I woke up that morning and it felt like I had a runner's stitch in my stomach, you know. Um, and those typically go away, so I really didn't think anything of it. It bothered me all day. My mileage wasn't terribly great. Like it just didn't feel right. Um, But we went to breakfast, good breakfast at the KMJ Diner there in Shippensburg, Pennsylvania. I also got a tour of the town, like a lot of awesome history in that town. One thing I really love about Pennsylvania, especially all the places along like the Lincoln Highway and stuff, are like a lot of these older towns and cities have done their best to either refurbish or, upkeep these old, these 200-300-year-old buildings. Like that's cool to me, to see a building that was built in 1790, 230 years old, that is still looks a lot like it used to, and that people live there, and like I don't know, it's really awesome to see. Uh, but I keep going through this day, and the original goal was to go like 19 miles into Carlisle, and I'm just I'm something was off, like, and I had met up earlier in the day. I had reached out to Representative Napoleon Nelson, who had introduced House Bill 1519 in Pennsylvania, which sought to allow students up to 3 mental health days per year. Uh, he's worried that there may be some pushback on that, but I wanted to reach out to him, and he drove out. He had a conference to go to that day to talk about um, African American kids and the higher rates of depression and suicide that they're starting to see. And he had this plan, but he still made time out of his day to like drive out, meet with me, talk mental health. He dropped off like a couple of gift cards. A few Quest bars, and like we kind of just chatted for a few minutes, and that's where the I would have loved to have been able to sit down and record this, but like he's got to be going before too long, and we're on the side of the road, so it's like hard to schedule that. So hopefully, like going forward, we can schedule more of those interviews where I can actually have these people, whether they're sitting here with me right now on the podcast, or we can just splice it in and you guys can watch the interviews as we go, because that's part of what our mission is to do, is to like put this information out there. And it would probably be better to hear it from these people's mouths themselves, in case I don't fumble and trip over something. Um, but I keep going. At that point, I told him, I was like, yeah, I was like, I'm going to stop at Sheets and have some dinner. Yes, I know, Sheets. Not a whole lot of options. So I got to Sheets around 4 o'clock, uh, grabbed some food. Right before Sheets, a couple of miles before I got to Sheets, I had a car pull up on me, and it was Diana, you'll see there on the left, and Justina on the right. They had driven past me a couple of times on the road, and eventually they were like, "Well, before we go home, I want to stop and talk to him." And we got to talking about the cause. That's obviously that's the big thing when somebody pulls up on me and we talk, like, "Hey, what are you walking for?" So we got to talking, and we got to talking about people in their lives that have been affected by various mental health issues and things like that. And they both said thank you, and like they prayed for me, which I'll never turn down. Somebody that wants to pray for me on my journeys. Um, I made a donation, and they both reached out to the page via Facebook Messenger, like, "Hey, if you need anything else, let us know." And I was like, I will. I'll try. I'm not very good at asking for help, but I will do my best. Um, but I go to Sheets, I have my dinner, and at this point, we still don't have anywhere to stay. One of the Carlisle fire stations had okayed me, but I still had like 9 miles, 8 or 9 miles to go to get there. And I was like, man, I'm not going to make it. It's like 5 o'clock right now, and I can't make 8 or 9 miles up before it's dark. And I'm not feeling good. Luckily, um, Adam, one of our volunteers, one of my good buddies, he had tried to reach out to a church. It had some limited office hours, but it was only about another like 9/10 of a mile up the road. So I started going that way, and he's like, "Yeah, I never heard back from him." So I was like, "Well, I'm gonna keep going. I'm gonna try to get there." And as I came up to the church, I saw that there were cars in the parking lot, and I'm like, am I going to get lucky here? Is there somebody going to be here? So I walk up and like I go to the front door and there's a couple people there and a gentleman comes out and I explain what I'm doing, who I am, and he goes in. He's like, I ask him, hey, is there somewhere? Is it cool if I just throw my tent up for the night? I just need somewhere to camp. And they came out and they're like, yeah. And this gentleman walks me down to where they had like a picnic shelter type area, where I ultimately ended up setting up the tent. And yeah, we get to talking about the journey and everything. And this was Pastor Van. Um, he sat there. He prayed for me. You can see the shelter there in the background that I ended up camping underneath that night. He prayed for me, and we were talking about the stomach issue, and he was like, "Well, do you mind if I pray for that as well?" And I said, "Again, no, I'll never say no to somebody that wants to pray for me." Um, so he prayed that God would take away the pain in my stomach. Oh, I got my tent set up that night after sitting around for a while, just kind of like trying to decompress for the day. And I don't know what it was, but like as I was laying down, the pain went astronomical. I could not find a position to sleep in, and it was still all in that lower right hand area of my stomach, which getting my Google MD that night was like, okay, you may have appendicitis, your appendix may have ruptured. I could not find a spot to sleep. I would fall asleep for like 20, 30 minutes. Um, when I woke up after the last little bit of that time as the sun was coming up, I I got up and started trying to pack up camp, and I was like, I couldn't stand up straight. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't walk without pain. I was like, something's wrong because I've got a pretty high pain tolerance. This this had me in tears at times, not like full blown, but I was like, so. Um, I had reached out to Diana, one of the women that I had met the day before. She's an LPN, and she was like, "Well, I'll take you to the hospital." So I slowly packed up camp. I reached out to Pastor Van. Um, they were agreed to hold the cart overnight or for a few days to see, depending on how long whatever was going on would take. So Diana gets there. Her mom had a key to the church. They take the cart in. I keep my backpack just in case. It's like I don't know what's going on. If they end up admitting me, I want to have some of my stuff with me. And again, I also keep the book of all the names in that day pack, so that thing stays with me. Um, but we get to the hospital. Go through everything in the ER. She drops me off. They do a CT scan. CT scans inconclusive. There's nothing they can see. They do an ultrasound. Nothing on the ultrasound. And at this point, the doctor comes out, and I'm like, and I'm not crying because of the pain. Like I'm on the verge of tears because I'm asking this doctor, like, so am I just imagining this? Like, where is this? What you're telling me, what I'm trying to understand is that it's not my appendix, it's not my gallbladder, but I am in a lot of pain. And she did two separate like physical examinations, pushing on my stomach, like moving my legs in a certain way. And she's like, I don't feel comfortable discharging you with the amount of pain you're in. I'm like, yeah, I don't want to be discharged with this amount of pain. So the surgeons come in, and they say, the CT scans and stuff aren't always the be all end all to there being something wrong. They said it could still be the appendix, and then it's so recent that my white blood cell count hadn't shot up in response to it, because all my blood numbers were good. But they get me in. Luckily, I hadn't eaten or drank anything because I didn't feel like it. They got me in for surgery, um, which is the first time I've ever had like I guess it's the second after the motorcycle wreck, but like having like an emergency surgery like that, not one where it was planned weeks or a month or whatever in advance. Um, I come out, and at the time that I had went in, like I had already talked to my mom, and she hit the road to get out to Carlisle, Pennsylvania to meet me. Uh, the doctor comes in and he says what happened was called an omental infarction. So at some point, some of my fatty tissue, of which I have plenty, had either gotten hung up on scar tissue inside me or had just like rolled over or twisted on itself, and the blood flow was cut off and it died inside me. So I had like dead fattiness just sitting inside my stomach, and that's where all this pain was coming from. Now they also took the appendix out because the appendix doesn't really do anything, and like if something else comes up in that area in the future, that's one less thing that the doctors have to worry about. Uh, so we go through that. Um, Doctor tells me you cannot lift anything over 10 pounds for the next 3 to 4 weeks, especially given my history with the hernia and the motorcycle accident and all the pelvic trauma that I've suffered. They don't want to risk another hernia, a new hernia. So uh, I had to make the difficult decision to postpone the walk because after that month or so of time would have gone out, we would have been in too much of a position where I'd be running into uh, potentially running into bad winter weather as I worked my way south. And uh, for once, I really tried to think with my head and not my heart. And anybody that really knows me, and I've said it in a few of the social media videos that I've put out on TikTok, Facebook, whatnot. Um, it hurts because I've been an athlete my whole life. Like you set a goal, you want to achieve it, and having to take time off was never a plan in this. But you have to play the hand you're dealt, and it wasn't necessarily anything that I could uh, control. I mean, this case, the omental infarction. Out of every 1,000 cases of appendicitis, I think only 4 of them are ever diagnosed as this. And I think medical journals have only documented like 400 cases since the early 1900s. Like it's not a common thing. So it's obviously not really anything that I could control. I mean, I guess other than not just being overweight and having hernia surgery and stuff like that, that's all obviously like complications or comorbidities that could have contributed to it or whatnot. But like it wasn't anything that I like directly like I made a choice, so this was the result. So I had to kind of make peace with it. So we are postponing all across the country to until April 1st. Yes, April Fool's Day. Uh, on the 1st of April, 2025, I will head right back out to the church, the um, Christian Life Community Church, where I crashed out for that night and slept, and we'll resume the journey from there to Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and then to Albany, New York, and all points in between. Uh, but it's not going to stop. We're going to use the next 6 months. I'm going to go back to work somewhere. Still working on that, to put money away to make sure my bills are still covered when we resume the walk. And we are going to attempt to be a lot more aggressive and proactive about seeking sponsorship as we continue the walk. I want to get away from having to feel like I and we are begging people to donate money to keep us going. Um, because I know the dollar doesn't go as far as it used to go, and I'd much rather try to get a shoe sponsorship or um, a restaurant chain to be like, look, here's some gift cards as you go. We'll make sure you're covered when you're in these towns. Like anything like that helps us reduce our operating costs is what we're going to go for. And we're also going to try to start getting into public speaking and things like that. That way, when the walk resumes, we have a kind of a resume built in that regard, and a track record of hopefully good engagement with people, and can use that to spread the message and things like that. And again, hopefully, we've got some sponsors at that point to where uh, we don't have to depend on people donating their hard-earned money. They can put that money towards the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, or another nonprofit. If they still want to donate to us, we're obviously not going to say no. It does all help us with this mission of getting that walk going and finishing it and being as safe as possible. Because walking 48 states and capitals is a long endeavor, and it'll probably be 3.5 years once I resume to still finish it. So and that's with no hiccups. So let's we're gonna aim to get better in the next 6 months. So when we kick back off in April, we'll be able to do it better than we've been doing it. So I want to thank you guys who have followed along and who have subscribed to these. I'm still hoping to do some interviews, whether it be with mental health professionals or other people, in the fight for mental health as we uh, go through the next few months. So don't completely lose hope or lose faith and haul across the country, because we're still here, and the mission is going to continue. And remember, if you or anyone you know is in crisis, please dial 988. Reach out, get help. It's there. There are people that care, and you just got to be willing to reach out. So I love you guys. I hope you guys have a great rest of your week, and we'll see you next time. Uh, at the very least, it'll be April 1st, 2025. All across the country's back. So we'll be back, guys.